Hi and welcome. I'm TJ Walker. This is the TJ Walker Success Channel where I try to help you become more successful through more effective communication, more confident communication. Well, one of the things we do here frequently is sort of take you behind the scenes and show you how does a content creator actually work? How do they create things? All the messy process. We make Amazon influencer videos here, short form videos, long form videos. So what I'm going to do right now is make some short form videos where I'll be at different angles and longer forms. And I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to take questions from ChatGPT about communication skills. Most of the time, I take questions from you, my students, viewers, people of the community, but I'm also going to experiment through using artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and see what we come up with. I have a list of questions here. I've not read them yet, other than the few I've already done. So I'm going to hit record. I'm coming to you live on StreamYard. I also have a mixer, and everything is then recorded at 4K. You're seeing this on 1080p, and I'm not much of a techie, but that's lower quality than 4K, which cannot be streamed yet, at least to my knowledge, on any service I'm using. Okay, so I'm going to hit record. You're going to see some of what I'm doing. We're going to do different camera angles here and try to make this look good. Okay. So before I even hit record, let's just look at the first question. How can I, okay, we've done that one. I got to scratch it off. What are some common mistakes novice speakers make, and how can I avoid them? Okay, that is a question I've dealt with before, but it comes up a lot. ChatGPT is saying that's what the world is talking about, so I'll do another one on that. Okay, so now I'm going to hit record. I'll do a long one from camera 1, then I'll do a short one from camera 2. What are some of the most common mistakes most beginners make when speaking, and how can you avoid them? Number one, the biggest problem of all is not the ums, the uhs, shaking, sweat. The biggest problem of all is being boring. It's preparing data point after data point after data point, slides, bullet points, standing up, being professional, going through, having a nice logo, and you're boring people to death because it's like an assembly line where here's a fact and here's a fact and here's a fact and here's a fact. And it just is like a water torture test. It numbs people. That is far and away the biggest mistake people make. The second biggest mistake novices make, and it relates to the first one, is they don't rehearse on video. The number one thing you can do to dramatically, and I mean dramatically, improve your presentations, whether you're a first grader or you're 80 years old, the number one thing you can do is to rehearse on video. I know, you don't want to do it. I don't like looking at myself. I don't like my voice, DJ. I've heard it all before. Guess what? Nobody cares. Everyone else in the audience has to hear you. They have to see you. So if you want to get better, again, it doesn't matter if you're 4 years old or 140 years old, you need to practice your presentation on video, because then you can use your own judgment. You can actually see that you're being really boring. You can actually see that you're not interesting. You wouldn't want to listen to you, so why would anyone else? You can actually see the bullet points you're pointing to that seem obvious to you. No one else can even see. So you can now correct your presentation by doing another version. The real secret to being great, whether you've never given a speech in your life or you've given 10,000, is to keep practicing on video, and you can just use your cell phone until you love what you see. Because Chances are you're a harsh critic of yourself. We all are. If you can point to a speech, a presentation, a talk that you've given on video and say, wow, this person's pretty good. I would listen to this person. This person's interesting. If you can do that, you're going to be automatically a top 1% speaker because most people never do that. And most people bore, and most people make all sorts of mistakes that are very easy to correct if you just watch it on video first. So those are the two most common mistakes people make as novices, and that is how you can avoid them. Okay, that was the longer version. That was what, about 4 minutes long. Ideally, I would be making videos. Let me just stop the recording. Ideally, I would be making videos 8 minutes plus, because at 8 minutes on YouTube, all sorts of other monetization opens up. They can stick in more ads. YouTube likes the longer videos. It shows more retention if you can keep people. So that was a little shorter than I wanted, but it's still, I think, good content that will help people a lot. So we're going to, and by the way, I see some of you are watching. Thanks so much. We didn't promote this or advertise this. I won't be taking questions in this session. I will be coming back today at 10:45 a.m. and we're going to go maybe a couple of hours. So if you have any questions, please come back then for our live freewheeling session. Today is just a session for me to do some production stuff and kind of show you behind the scenes. Now, sometimes I screw up and do it over. That last one I did in one take. There will be some editing, but I'm not going to sit there and redo it. It wasn't scripted. I'm just sharing things I've said a gazillion times to students in real life and in person. So now I'm going to do the short one where I'm going to try to, it needs to be less than 60 seconds or it doesn't count as a short. But I find for my sweet spot, often it is the 12-second to 20-second range. I don't know if I'll get it that short. Again, I'm not going to time it out and count the words the way some people do, but I am going to try to make it relatively short. Refresh my memory. What are the most common mistakes novice speakers make and how can I avoid them? So I'm going to try to focus on just one. I got to hit the record button. Now I've got to make sure I'm standing far enough. Got to get the right camera angle. So sometimes I've been standing too close and this is too close. So I've got to make a note to myself to stand back like this. What is the number one mistake most novice speakers make and how can you avoid them? It's being boring. It's telling yourself, a speech is telling people everything I know. Here's a point. Here's another point. Here's another point. And you're pounding people with data points and it's boring. Don't do that. The solution, focus on one idea at a time. No more than a handful in any one presentation. Okay, so I think, I'm going to hit stop recording. I think that's a solid short because it is an important point. It deals with mistakes. My own data tells me that people really like hearing about mistakes. So I think that's a solid one. We'll go on to the next. How can I use audience feedback to build my confidence in public speaking? Okay, let's do that one. We'll do that starting at this angle. How can you use audience feedback to build your confidence as a public speaker? Now, you can always wait until people, okay. So as I mentioned, I typically try to do things in one take, but I screwed up there. So we're not going to use that. I'm going to start over again. How can you use audience feedback to build your confidence as a speaker? You can always sort of wait for people to come up and say, hey, good job, great, and feel good. But you know what? That's ultimately meaningless. You can ask people, how'd I do? Chances are they're going to say, great, good job. Again, totally meaningless. Here's how you use audience feedback. If someone comes up to you and gives you any feedback, say, thanks a lot, but tell me, what do you remember about my presentation? Now, I do that all the time. And if someone says, well, TJ, it was a great presentation. You were charismatic. You looked great. You looked like the total professional. You sounded great. You really come across as a very professional speaker. If that's what someone tells me, I now have 100% evidence that my speech was a complete and utter failure. That's right. That's a failure. If all someone is doing is commenting on my style or professionalism, it means I didn't actually give them ideas that help them and make them improve. So that's not what I want. What I really want is for them to tell me ideas they heard, stories, examples that they can relate to, that they're going to try, that resonate with them. And that's what you want. You want to ask people, hey, how would you describe or summarize my speech today to your colleague Jim or Sally, who couldn't come today and who were supposed to be here? And listen. If they just say generic things, oh, it was a really good, he gave us a good overview of blah, 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 you didn't really communicate. You want to hear specific messages, specific ideas, ideally stories you told people in your presentation. Then make a mental note, because quite often it was during the question and answer session. The problem so many speakers have is they're so abstract. They're going through all the data points, all these numbers, all these bullet points, and it's not memorable. And then someone at the end asks them a question and they instantly launch into an example about, well, here's what happened last week at this plant with our customer, Jim, and they're telling a story that makes the idea come alive. And then when you ask the audience member after, what do you remember? They remember that story. Well, don't wait to tell that story just because someone asks a question next time. Bring that story out right at the beginning if it helps you make a point that's important to you and important to the audience. Our goal is not to be remembered just to be remembered. We want people to remember ideas that are important to us, that are useful and relevant to them. So that's really the best way to get feedback from an audience member. You also have to learn how to discount it. Someone may just not like the color purple or blue and say, well, what'd you wear that tie for? That tie was so distracting. Well, maybe not. Sometimes people will give you bad advice. They will say, well, TJ, you shouldn't move around so much. Why are you walking around? The professional speaker is supposed to stand, feet planted. I would discount information like that. You want to listen to all feedback, but just because one person doesn't like the fact that you moved around or gestured, doesn't mean that's how it related to everyone else. In my own experience, audiences around the world react much more favorably to speakers who move their hands when they speak. But if you speak to 200 people and you gesture, someone could come up and say, TJ, you gestured too much. You moved your hands. You should keep your hands on the lectern. Bad advice. The world is full of bad advice when it comes to speaking because everybody has an opinion. So be very discerning about what you actually try to incorporate. Now, if 5 people come up and say, hey, TJ, you were pacing back and forth in a way that made you look very nervous. Well, yes, I would listen to that. Ideally, the best way to get feedback in a meaningful way is to not only listen to the feedback, but then to watch the video of your presentation so you can sync what they're saying. Because you might not be aware you're pacing in a very rhythmic way that makes you look nervous. But if someone says it and then you watch the video and you see it and you're hearing it and seeing it, that is feedback that can really help you. And the confidence comes from correcting the problem. The confidence does not come from an intellectual understanding or awareness of the fact that you're pacing too much. The confidence comes from then doing another speech, doing another rehearsal, doing another practice, and you see you're no longer doing the pacing. That's where feedback is meaningful, in that it helps you actually change your behavior. So, yes, listen to feedback everywhere, but don't just say thanks if someone gives you a general compliment. Always go deeper, say thanks, but the most important question of all is asking them, what did you remember? And then really listen. Okay, so that's it for that long form one. I'm now going to try to do the very same thing, but make it available for short. Now, we're still experimenting here. I am not new to making videos. I've been making videos for 50 years, but I am new to doing daily live streams for this long a time, and then trying to figure out how to edit it to make high quality short form video for TikTok and LinkedIn and all social media, Instagram, and then high quality long form. Let me hit stop. Sorry, I did. Okay. And high quality long form. So that's the bit of the experiment. And I thought I would just share this with you. Why hide it? If you can gain, and you may notice I'm drinking a lot, because when you're speaking without realizing it on video, camera, performing, you're pushing a lot more air over your vocal cords than normal. You dry them out. You do it too long, you're not going to be able to speak. So I am going to drink frequently. Okay. So now I'm going to do the short form of that. I'm going to go to camera 2, remind myself of the question, and then hit record. What's the best way to get feedback from an audience member to build your confidence as a speaker? If someone says, hey, great job, good speech today, really professional, don't just say thanks. Say thanks and then say, what did you remember? If the only thing they remember is that you seemed competent and professional, guess what? You didn't do a very good job. What you're listening for is them telling you specific messages, examples, and stories they remember. That's the ultimate test of any presentation. And if your audience members can tell you that, that is valuable feedback that will build your confidence. Okay, so that's the short version of that. I'm going to hit stop record and go to the next question. How can I effectively use eye contact to manage my speech anxiety? Okay, that's a version of a question that I've heard many, many times. I'm going to try to give something fresh and give my best advice. Do a quick check, make sure all my lights are on. Okay. And those of you just joining us, thanks so much. This is sort of behind the scenes workshop where I'm just sharing with you how I actually make videos, edited videos for YouTube Shorts and long, and videos that go out on all social media. So if you have a question or anything, please come back to our sort of official live show, which starts at 10:45 a.m. today Eastern time. So that's in an hour and 25 minutes. We'll be doing that. And I'll take all your questions. I'll stay as long as anyone has a question. So we'll have a conversation, debate, and we'll talk about communications related issues. But right now I'm recording videos to be used later, edited down for YouTube long videos and YouTube Shorts. Okay, so I'm going to hit record. So this is, again, how can I effectively use eye contact to manage my speech anxiety? And we'll go to camera 1. How can you effectively use eye contact to manage your speech anxiety? Nothing's worse than being in the audience, seeing a speaker, and they're not looking at you. They're reading their notes or they've turned their back and they're looking at a PowerPoint slide because you feel ignored. And if you're the speaker, you may think, well, I don't want to look at people, I'll get nervous. The problem is you are now perceived as nervous and rude to the audience. And if you think about it, that's what actually should make you have more anxiety, is this fear of, I look scared in front of people. So you don't want to ignore the audience. Now, what a lot of people do is they're looking at the audience, but they're scanning the whole audience. They're never really making eye contact. They're looking at a group of 20 or 30 people at once, and that can make you anxious. We are biologically programmed prehistorically to fear crowds, because if you're out in the savannah in Africa and you're completely exposed and every lion and saber-toothed tiger and every predator can see you from every direction, you're exposed. They could come and eat you. So that's why we start feeling fear. That's why the adrenaline gets in us. That's why we start sweating. Sweat's coming out of our palms and our feet because our body's telling us, run, get away. Things are dangerous. So that's the problem with looking at entire groups. So what do? The famous talk show host and comedian Jay Leno said when he started, he was so nervous, he would just look over people's heads. Not really a good idea, because if people feel that you're not looking at them, that gives them permission to ignore you and look at their cell phone. That can create a negative feedback loop where you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not looking at them, but they're not looking at me. We're all ignoring each other. What am I doing up here? That is going to create more anxiety for you. The thing that's going to make you less anxious, the thing that's going to give you the most confidence, is that you have a strong feeling of, I'm nailing this. This is going really well. This audience is paying attention to me. They're understanding me. They're hanging on every word. They're liking this. That is going to make you completely full of confidence, legitimate confidence, not some sort of imagine everyone giving you a standing ovation and thinking you're beautiful, or some sort of imagine your audience in the underwear. Bad advice. You want to actually connect with your audience and be good. And the eye contact is a way to do it. Now, I already mentioned the worst thing to do is stare at your notes, stare at your PowerPoint, stare over people's heads. The next worst thing you can do is this windshield wiper thing, where you're kind of looking at 20, 30 people at once and you're quickly going through the whole audience. Or think of it like a water sprinkler. You're quickly trying to cover a lot of ground. Don't do that. The most effective way to use eye contact to reduce your anxiety is to look at one person at a time for a thought. Now, when I say a thought, what I mean is just a couple of sentences, one idea, and then go to another person. Have a private one-on-one conversation with that person. Now, this is going to do several things. It's going to relax you. It's going to make you less anxious because you've limited your field of vision. You're no longer looking at 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 people at once. So your brain is telling you, hey, this is easy. I'm just talking to one person. Here's the other thing it does, and it's extraordinarily powerful. Truly great speakers are masters of this. When you look at one person and you really lock eyes just for 2 sentences, 4 or 5 sentences, then they're going to feel like, wow, this speaker really looked at me. I better pay attention. I better put my cell phone away and actually listen. It puts just a little bit of tension in the lap of the audience member. Now, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but I do want them to pay attention. We've all been at conferences or lectures where you go in and the speaker is just lecturing and looking at notes and looking at a screen. You feel like you could stand on the top of your desk or your chair, light your hair on fire. They'd never notice. They're not paying attention. And because of that, you also feel like you can daydream. You can multitask and send texts to your friends and family and check sports scores and go on social media. I don't want my audience to feel that relaxed. That is the power of the eye contact. When you're looking at them and they see you looking at them, and you see that they see you're looking at them, it puts everyone on notice. Now, here's the thing. What gets people nervous is, oh, I don't want to seem rude. I don't want to seem like I'm staring at someone. You're not. I'm not suggesting you're speaking to 50 people and you stare at one person on the front row for your 20-minute speech. That would be weird. That would weird out the person. That would make everyone else think you're weird, and they would tune out because they feel excluded. What you want to do is give more or less equal attention to everyone in the audience. So if you're speaking to 20 people for 10 minutes and you're locking eyes for just 4 seconds, 5 seconds, that means you can give every single person in the room individual eye contact several times. Now, please note, you're not just giving eye contact to the one friendly face in the front row, your mother or your best friend who's smiling. There is a school of thought that says, oh, if you're nervous, just look at one smiley face and look at them. Yeah, that might make you feel a little better short term, but long term, if you know you're making everyone else feel ignored and they're tuning out, that's actually going to make you more anxious. I want to really go to the root cause of anxiety, which is quite often we're afraid we're not going to really help our audience. We're not going to be interesting to your audience. So I want you to use every single tool at your disposal to be interesting to your audience. And that does mean using your eyes. Now, keep in mind a few other things. Occasionally, you'll look at someone for 4 seconds and they will look down and they will feel mildly uncomfortable. That's okay. Again, I'm not going to go up and violate someone's physical space. I'm not going to touch them or hug them or kiss them. But if I'm looking at someone for 2 sentences for a couple of sentences and they want to look down, that's okay. I really don't think they're going to file a lawsuit against you. Now, keep in mind, there are people around the world watching this from different cultures. You have to factor what I'm saying through the prism of your own culture. There may be cultures where this is not acceptable, but I can tell you, I do have students in 190 countries, and I have trained in 45 separate countries. So the advice I'm giving does work most of the time in most places. Can there be differences when it comes to gender and race and social class? Yes, there can. But in general, the advice I'm giving you, I do believe is going to help you most of the time use eye contact to give you more confidence. A few other things to keep in mind. You're not just giving eye contact to the CEO, who's the most important person in the room, because that's the person who can sign your contract if you're giving a new business pitch. Because that person may be important, but there can be 8 other people in the room, account executives, who all get to weigh in on whether they want to hire you or someone else. And if they feel ignored or slighted because you were looking at the big shot, the most important person in the room, that's going to make you look bad. It's going to make you look like a suck up. So again, the key is you're giving everyone little bits of attention, but it's not quick. It's not the 1/8 of a second that most people do. It's not that windshield wiper. You're really looking at someone for a sentence or two, one idea, then going to the next person. Now, you don't want to do it like this. You don't want to just go around the room. That's going to make you seem mechanical. You want to give your eye contact randomly. Here, then here, then here, then here. And I'm just making that up. The point is, it needs to be random. Once you really learn how to use eye contact effectively, it's going to be a secret weapon. people are going to feel like, wow, I don't know what it was, but that speaker really connected with me. I really felt like I had to pay attention. That is the power of using eye contact the right way to build your confidence and your effectiveness every time you speak. Okay, so that was the long version of how I would answer that question. Now I'm going to try to do a truncated version of that can be used for YouTube Short. Now we're still in an experimental phase with a lot of our production. And new things come out every single day. Did I hit stop? Yeah. And new things come out every single day with artificial intelligence tools for taking long form content and creating great short form content. So it may be after a while those tools are so good that I don't even bother doing the short form video. We can just take the long form and use AI and turn it magically into short form. But I'm trying to make life easier for my editors. So for right now, we're doing it in this way where I'm doing two different versions. So now I'm going to try to do a short form version. And so we'll go to camera 2. And I'm going to hit record. Reminding myself of the question, eye contact to manage speech anxiety. What's the most effective way to use good eye contact to manage your anxiety when giving a speech? Well, it's not to stare at your notes, ignore the audience, or look over their head, or stare at a clock. And it's not to be a windshield wiper and look at everyone all the time. The best thing you can do with your eye contact to make you feel comfortable and your audience comfortable is to look at one person at a time just for 2 sentences, just for a couple of ideas, one thought. Then go to the next person. Do that systematically throughout your entire presentation. If you do that, you'll be less anxious. Your audience will be much more engaged in you and your message. Okay, so that is the short form that we'll try to use for that one. Okay. And if you are joining me live, thanks so much. A couple of program notes. If you are one of my regular Udemy students, online course platform, we have a special session just for you live today at 10 a.m., which is just in 26 minutes. I'll be coming to you live. That'll be on our Facebook page. Then at 10:45, in just an hour and 10 minutes, we'll be back here taking your questions live, doing more demonstrations. I'll be making more Amazon influencer videos, talking about that process and trying to help those of you who are trying to figure out how to get into the whole influencer game. So that's going to be fun. You're not going to want to miss that. Okay. Let's do one more, then I'm going to have to take a break to make a few phone calls before we go to the next live session. Next question. What are some strategies to overcome communication anxiety in professional settings? Okay. So I've certainly heard that question before. This is stated a little bit differently. And if you're just joining me, and hello, Ashu, thanks so much for joining me. I'm just doing sort of a behind the scenes thing today where I am producing my videos, the first draft that will be my long form YouTube videos and YouTube shorts, and for TikTok and other places too. And for Facebook, I see you're on Facebook. And I'm showing you how I do it. And if I mess up, I'll tell you, I stop and I start right again. So it's a little bit of a behind the scenes. So first thing we're going to do is a long form for this question. What are some strategies to overcome communication anxiety in professional settings? So we'll do that. I'm now hitting record to capture the higher quality video. So what can you do to reduce your anxiety when it comes to communicating in professional settings? For starters, Let's step back and ask ourselves, why are we feeling anxious in the first place? If you absolutely knew that when you spoke, everyone would pay attention, everyone would understand you, and everyone would find you incredibly interesting, and that they would remember what you're saying and then take the actions you want, whether it's to buy from you, hire you, sign the contract, vote for you, would it even be possible to feel anxious or nervous? Well, no. Then it would be almost painful not to be out speaking every single day. So I want you to look at it through that lens. So many people come to this through a negative defensive lens of, I want to get through this speech, and as long as I don't look stupid, I'll be happy. As long as I don't make a mistake, I'll be happy. As long as I look professional. And they're going into a presentation with very low expectations. It's like going to your financial advisor at the beginning of the year saying, as long as you don't lose $1 million for me this year, I'm happy. You don't have to make any money. Just don't lose half my money. Would you ever say that to your investment manager? I don't think you would. You go into any investment strategy, a new financial manager, with the idea that I'm going to make a bunch of money, right? You should have exactly the same attitude when it comes to every speech, every presentation, every briefing, every talk you give. So keep that in mind. What's creating this anxiety is this obsession of, not stepping on a crack, not falling down. That's not how you win races. You win races by focusing on the goal and running there faster or going faster some way to get to the end line, not by simply avoiding mistakes. So forget about counting the ums and ahs. Forget about worrying about what should I do with my left hand here? I have no control. Forget about that. And instead, focus on what ideas do you have that are important to you, that you really want this audience to know, to remember, and to act upon. If you do that, I promise you, your anxiety will melt away. Part of what creates so much anxiety is you're trying to do something impossible. You're trying to take 89 bullet points or 23 slides that each have 14 and a half bullet points on them. You're trying to cover way too much material in too small amount of time. So you start speaking faster and your head is buried. You're going, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of time. And you start apologizing. And it's data point, data point, data point. And at some level, consciously or subconsciously, you're being boring. Nobody's really paying attention. You're going through the motions of giving a presentation. They're going through the motions of kind of paying attention. And no one's really accomplishing anything. So that is what is creating anxiety when it comes to your communication opportunities in professional situations. So much of being a good communicator has nothing to do with what you're wearing, your eye contact, your hands, the quality of your voice. It simply has to do with having the discipline of being a better editor, using judgment. The biggest problem most people have in professional situations is they do not use their judgment. So they try to tell people everything. When you tell people everything, you're really telling them nothing because you're just overwhelming them with data. It's kind of like if someone says, hey, I'd like to get educated, and you just say, well, go to the internet, all the facts are there. Go to Wikipedia, all the facts are there. Well, yeah, but that's not helpful. That's too much. What's going to give you so much more confidence, what's going to reduce your anxiety in professional situations is knowing you have truly used your judgment. You've thought about everything you know, what is most important for this audience to know. And typically that means you've narrowed it down to 5 ideas or fewer. And whatever time you have left, you're going to flesh out those ideas with examples, with case studies, with real stories, not feel-good stories about starfish, but real stories involving real conversations with real clients, real colleagues, real customers about real problems, where you were, how you solved them, and why this particular story is relevant to you and the audience. If you do that, you're going to find your anxiety is going to melt away. That when you are in professional situations and you have an opportunity to communicate, you're going to be excited about it because you're going to know, hey, I'm going to help people and it's going to help me, whether you're trying to get more clients or customers or doing it out of the goodness of your heart. You're going to feel good because you're actually going to help people and help yourself, because that's really the number one source of anxiety when it comes to communicating in professional situations, is this fear of I'm not really going to help them or myself. So please follow these tips. Think about, what does your audience have to know that you know that's really going to help them? Narrow your messages down to just a handful. And then practice your presentation where you're talking to people and looking at people and not just staring at notes and looking at a PowerPoint deck. Do that and your anxiety will melt away. Okay, so that was, I think, about a 6.5, 7 minute. I'm hitting stop on the record. So that's a little closer to the long one. Now, where I'm still not that good is I'm trying to do the 8-9 minute videos, which tend to work best for the algorithm on YouTube and other platforms, without having every single word scripted, because I don't like doing it that way. So I'm having to lengthen more. That's a part of my challenge. Everyone has things they need to learn. And quick hello to Ashley says hello. Thanks for being our life coach, and I hope you will give us more. Well, I'm going to give you, I think, more than anyone else in the entire world when it comes to content about how to communicate, because we started going live almost 3 hours a day. I'll be back here live in 1 hour and 2 minutes. So if you have questions, concerns, thoughts, videos you want me to critique, we'll do it right here together. I'm going to be signing off in just a minute or two. Matthew says, I had the pleasure of taking TJ's course on Udemy about public speaking. I learned a lot of things. And Matthew, I'm going to practice what I preach. What specifically did you learn? Learning a lot of things is abstract. I'm glad you did. But tell me just 1 or 2 things you learned that you're actually incorporating into your daily professional or personal life when it comes to speaking. And Matthew says, I have a question. How do you come up with content ideas? Well, typically it's by asking you for what questions you have. Today is a little different. I just typed into Chat GPT, give me 20 questions that relate to communication skills that are not just the most obvious common questions of what do I do if I'm nervous before a speech. That's how I got these. So there are a lot of different ways. I got to do one short on that last topic, and then I'm going to have to sign off, but we'll be back here in an hour. Okay, I got to do this as a short. Camera 2. How do you reduce the anxiety you feel when it comes to communicating in professional environments? Well, step back and ask yourself, what's the source of this anxiety? Chances are you're anxious because you're afraid you're going to bore people and it's not going to go very well. Well, guess what? That's a real concern. It makes sense. It's logical to be anxious about that. The solution, though, is to prepare the right way. Figure out what are just a handful of ideas you have that are really going to be interesting and memorable and useful to that audience. Now prepare your speech in a different way. Practice your presentation, giving examples, telling stories, and watch it until you get to the point that you find it interesting. Once you do that, you're going to be excited to speak anywhere and everywhere, any professional environment you can. Okay, so that's the short YouTube, TikTok short for that. I got to sign off now, and I will see you again in 1 hour if you're able to stop by live. And Matthew, thanks so much. Let's see, I would talk about many things that I managed to apply nowadays. What I use is on my YouTube channel and also in meetings about business. Hey, Matthew, I would love to put a spotlight on your YouTube channel. Come join me back here in an hour, and I will give the link to how to join us on StreamYard. And then you could join us live. We could showcase your YouTube channel as well. Thanks so much. See all of you later.